Now Lee's going to install the hard amp mount. This model bike is a Road Glide, so it has a specific style of amp mount for this fairing. If you're working with a Batwing fairing like an Electra Glide Ultra or Street Glide, the amp mount will actually attach to the top of the stock deck, and the amp will sit on top of the stock head unit. The Road Glide fairing doesn't allow enough room for the amp to sit on top of the head unit, so we designed these brackets to allow the amp to be firmly mounted inside of a Batwing, or excuse me, a Road Glide style fairing. In our opinion, it's nice to have the amps mounted hard onto the aluminum plate. We've seen some applications where they get Velcroed on and stuff, and outside ambient temperature can cause the glue on the Velcro to fail. We just prefer to mount them hard, and the aluminum also helps to take heat out of the amp as well.
Okay, so we're going to prep the amplifier by setting the input switches, the crossovers, and the gain settings. This particular amplifier has only 2 channels of output on the speaker lines, so we're going to move the input switch to 2 channel. That allows two sets of inputs to run all 4 channels of the amplifier. Now, since we don't have subwoofers on this motorcycle, we're going to go ahead and switch the crossovers to high pass, or HP. Now, this will block all the low frequency signals that we would normally send to a subwoofer amplifier. This allows this high frequency amplifier to generate the maximum sound quality available. We're also going to prep this, and since we know that we're working with the motorcycle source unit, we're going to adjust the gains to 5. There's a little dot on the potentiometers. Now that will set it so that the amplifier will send clean signal to the speakers without it clipping. The high level adjust, we're going to keep this set on the lowest setting at 4 volts. Now, since we're using high level speaker inputs, the amplifier senses the signal coming out of the radio from the speaker line, and it turns on and off. So we start this at a 4 volt rating here, and if the amplifier is not turning on and off correctly with the source unit, we can increase this slowly, but there's a pretty good range of 4 to 6 volts.
We would only use that with an aftermarket source unit. With the Harman Kardon unit, we wouldn't hook that up at all, right?
Right. Now on the opposite side of the amplifier, we have the speaker outputs. We have front and rear channels. This is where we're going to plug those Molex connectors into. And then we have the power connector. Now for this, we're only going to use the ground and B positive. Once we connect those 2 wires in there, we just plug this straight in. Remember, we're using high-level inputs, so we're not going to be using the remote turn-on.
The amp will come with 4 self-tapping screws that, as you screw them into the pre-drilled holes in the amp mount, they'll self-tap themselves into the aluminum. You don't need to torque these screws right now because you might have to move the amp a little bit to access the input plugs and such during speaker and input installations. The amp should be set to a 2-channel when you're using the factory Harman Kardon head unit. If you're using an aftermarket unit like an Alpine or a Sony, they'll have RCA connectors, and you can run the 2 or 4-channel inputs as provided in your aftermarket head unit. Now that the amp is installed on the mounting plate, we'll go ahead and remove the stock speakers.